In 1839, there was a Spanish slave ship called Amistad who was actually captured on the coast of Long Island. This is made famous by the movie Amistad, but if you don't know the story, basically these slaves, these African slaves, were put on trial, and they were trying to decide whether or not these people could be free men. The prosecutor basically said they were nothing more than cargo, and I know that probably makes a lot of us angry, and it should. But during the trial, one of the African slaves stood up and said this: "Give us free." In broken English, he was crying out for freedom. He said, "Give us free. Give us free." It's built down, deep down inside each and every one of us, this desire for liberty and freedom. I don't want to be a spoiler, but the good news is these men actually received their freedom. But for us, in our relationship with God, we're going to ask this question: are you free in Christ? Or are you living like you continually have to do good things to earn God's favor? You see, if you're living to earn God's favor, here's the truth: you're not free. You're actually a slave. You're living with an extra bondage that you may not even be aware of. And the truth is, it's really exhausting to live a life like that. We're going to turn to Galatians chapter 5, and we're going to see how the Apostle Paul talks about this particular subject. You see, the Galatian churches, they had been taught that Christ came, that he died on the cross for their sins, and that they must trust in what he did for them to have forgiveness of sins and be a child of God. But there was another group of people who came in after Paul. They were called Judaizers, and they came in and they had a different message. You see, their message was you had to obey the Old Testament law to truly have a relationship with God. Jesus is good, but he's only part of the equation. You see, Paul's equation, if it was a math equation, was this: faith in Jesus plus nothing equals salvation. If the Judaizers had an equation, it would be Jesus plus all of the stuff that we have to do to keep the Old Testament law equals salvation. Do you see the difference? One throws an extra load on the back of the believer. But here's the truth: there were some Galatian believers who were young enough in their faith where they just really didn't know which way to go, and some of them actually left the church. Join me in Galatians chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. It says this: "Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again in the yoke of bondage. Indeed, I, Paul, say to you that if you become circumcised, Christ will profit you nothing." See, what Paul is saying here, and it's really a warning to us not to slip back into legalism, but he's warning, and he's saying, listen, you're going to lose your spiritual advantage. Christ gives you the advantage of not being attached to the Old Testament law. And here's the crazy thing. They were saying, yes, you need to believe in Jesus, but you also need to be circumcised and obey. There were hundreds of different laws. They were saying you need to obey all of these different laws. And what Paul was saying is, no, Christ completed the law. He actually was the perfect one obeying the law on our behalf. And we don't need to go back into slavery and chain ourselves to a group of laws that Christ has already completed for us. You see, we know that Christ sets us free to enjoy true liberty. Can you say that? Christ sets us free to enjoy true liberty. A walk with Jesus shouldn't be burdensome. Why? Because Christ has set us free from that. We don't need to be enslaved by this idea of having to be attached to all of these laws. In fact, Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9 say this, that we are saved by grace through faith. And it's not of our own works, but it's the gift of God, because People can't boast. Why? Because it's God's gift to us. Guys, this is a freeing thought. Maybe you've spent your life, maybe you're even now spending your life trying to do things to make yourself right with God. Listen, if that was the case, if we could do that, Jesus never had to come and die in the first place. So the warning here is this: don't lose your spiritual advantage. Jesus says we don't have to obey all of the laws to earn favor with God. Jesus was the obedient one on our behalf. So it's super easy to slip into this mindset of, if I do this, this, and this, then I'll be right with God, because it makes us feel good about our own flesh. But we don't obey to be right with God. We obey because we are right with God. So our actions show that we've been changed, because Christ sets us free to enjoy true liberty. Here's the million-dollar question that we need to ask ourselves from this passage here. Are we experiencing the joy and freedom that Christ offers? Is your walk with Jesus joyful? Are you enjoying spending time with God? Or is it a burden because you have to earn certain things? That is not grace. And that is not what Paul is teaching here in this passage. And honestly, that's not the gospel. Because Jesus plus anything ruins everything. Today, if you're here and you say, honestly, I've been living that life and it's exhausting, there's freedom in this passage. Christ sets us free to enjoy true liberty. The King of Kings himself went to the cross on our behalf so that we could have that freedom. Are you living with that ball and chain around your ankle? Get rid of it, because you don't need it. Maybe you're here today and you've never experienced what it's like to have true liberty in Christ, to have a relationship with Jesus. And you say, you know what? Christ did that for me. I would love to have a relationship with God. Well, here's the good news. You can have that relationship right now. By turning to him and by saying, God, I know that I can't, but you did. I know that there's nothing I can do to earn a right relationship with God, but I believe that Jesus did on my behalf. Tonight, would you do that? If you've never done that before. Well, maybe you're here and you say, you know what, I'm a Christian, but I've been living that life of trying to earn my way to in kind of a partnership with God. Would you stop and just say, Lord, help me to live in the liberty that you've given me. Help me to be obedient, not because I feel like I need to earn something, but be obedient because I love you out of appreciation for what you've done for me. You see, it kind of turns our obedience from obligation to appreciation. We live not because we feel obligated to live a certain way or to say a certain thing. We do that because we've been changed from the inside by what Christ has done for us. If that's you today, will you make that commitment? Thank you for joining me tonight. I'll see you next time.